Okay, give this a go. I'm just trying out a Senna 10C head cam and intercom. So first time I've used it, so you might not get any sound or video, but just out on the Welsh lanes riding my Royal Enfield Himalayan. Owned it for 7 months now, just shy of 9,000 miles. Just got to take it up some trails. I'm over in Wales for a Welsh safari. I'm guiding 12 guys around the back roads of Wales, doing some trail riding and things. So far I've been really impressed with the Himalayan. I mean, you can see I've got luggage strapped there. I love the way that you can strap luggage to this bike. You know, I've normally have metal, the aluminium panniers on there, and the fact that you can balance the weight front to rear is really good. It's a stock bike. I've got the Continental Escape tyres on it. I have had knobblies on it, which I really like. The Mitas E09s, but they didn't last so long, so I've got the Conti Escapes on, which are perfectly fine for these dry roads. I've got a cool cover seat cover, which just helps with comfort. They're available to fit individual bikes. Just a tank bag that I've had on many bikes, and yeah, I love the fact that you've got places to tie things, some spare cable ties there. I've got the extra Ali bash plate on that's sold by Cooperb, a dealer in Northampton in the UK. Other than that, she's stock. Just got my tail bag in with a sleeping bag in and stuff. So we're going to go up this lane. I'm just going to try and ride and talk and try not to crash. Right, off we go. Taking it nice and steady. In fairness, when I first got this bike, the first thing I did was take it trail riding. I pretty much ran the bike in trail riding. The reason for that, I'd got nowhere to go, I suppose, other than trying some trails, and the bike really surprised me. The bike surprised me all round, just in its overall package, its quality. When it came back, to the dealers and I picked it up, I was surprised just how well put together it felt, how bigger in size, in scale it was when you sat on it. And the first ride out, I took it trail riding, and I was just impressed with everything about it. The stance, so the standing stance is really nice. There's a little bit of flare in the calf from where the side panels kick out a bit, which I think if you've got fat calves, there's not much of a solution. And you do initially notice it when you get on the bike and stand up, but that soon sort of fades away. I like the low down power. I think that's what I really liked about the engine. When I first went with trail riding, I was still breaking in the engine, so I couldn't really push it hard, but then off road you don't need to. And I just loved its really lovely low down torque. You know what I'm in now? I'm in first now, but it'll take second, and it just lollops along. The nature of this engine being a long stroke, it is designed not to be high revving, but just to give a nice dose of torque. And I think this is, these kind of trail environments are where the engine comes into its own. The engine is a little bit, let's call it slow on the road. When you're doing the back roads, the A and B roads, and you're just cruising along with nowhere to be, then I think it's a perfect engine. Really nice and torquey, really wafts you along, pulls out corners nicely, keeps up with traffic easily. It's just when you really want to push on, when you want to overtake something or chase something down, or you've got somewhere you need to be, that's where you think, I just wish it could rev out a little bit harder, give you a little bit more, bit more thrill at the top end. You start to think, well, with 5 more horsepower, would that do it? 10 more horsepower, but I think there's a point where you just have to accept this is what it is. The other thing I'm really impressed with on the trails was the suspension. It's a budget bike, therefore notionally with budget suspension, but it just seemed to absorb the rough stuff better than I expected. There's not a huge amount of travel, and there's not a huge amount of ground clearance, but it uses what it's got very well. The damping's very good, you can push on harder, the bike stays controlled, manageable, manoeuvrable. Fun, I think, is the main word. Weight wise, 191 wet is high. People look at that as on paper and go, that's quite heavy, which it is, but I think the way the bike carries its weight, which is low down, means it never really feels heavy, whether you're paddling it around or riding it on trail. Oh fuck it, what's up with me? That's another false neutral. It's not the bike, the rider on this occasion. So yeah, the suspension really impressed. So all in all, I did about 1,000 miles, mainly on trails and back roads. And then the first trip I did was a guided Land's End to John O'Groats run, guided 25 other riders. Or they're on all sorts of bikes, from small bikes to GSs to Africa Twins, F800s, and I think that's where the Himalayan impressed me with its other attribute, which is its travelling ability. Things from the 15 litre fuel tank, which give you a realistic 200 mile range, the seat, which is all day comfortable, and I must say I was a bit sceptical of the cool cover seat cover. The guy who owns the company used my bike to create a template for the seat, and I was a bit apprehensive when he gave it me, because I think he wanted good feedback, but initially I was a bit unsure. But after a week of doing 200 miles a day on all the back roads, I tried it without it and I was very uncomfortable by midday. So yeah, definitely worth having. I was impressed really with how well it carried its weight. You know, that engine, torquey engine, not got a lot of power, as we've said, top end, but that torque means that you can waft along with all your gear. I must have about 25 kilos of gear on the bike, and it does it, you know, we're barely making a dent on performance. It pulls nicely, still pulls really cleanly, still handles really well with that weight on. And I think what's good is that you can balance the weight by having half of it on the front bars like I've got. Now I've just got some Alt Rider cinch bags, like dry bags effectively, which I've strapped to the front racks. They're sturdy, they're on there, they're not going to go anywhere, and it also means you've got some weight over the front end rather than it all riding at the back. So I did 3 Land's End John O'Groats trips back to back, 2,500 miles each. I guess the question mark over reliability was in the back of my mind. Would it do those trips? Would it do them without issue? Because the last thing you want to do as a tour guide is have a problem with your own bike. It's bad enough having problems with other people's bike, let alone your own. But it did those 3 trips, no problems, without breaking sweat really. I think the only negative is that with all the weight on, you do find that the side stand's a little bit too long, and it does sit a bit upright, and I had it topple over a few times just because it was sat too upright, and with the suspension under its load, it didn't it just sat too low. Ways to get around that, I think, you know, a stiffer rear spring wouldn't do the bike any harm, both for putting your luggage, for the side stand issue, and just because it is quite a soft rear end. To be honest, I don't actually mind it for riding. I think it just makes it a nice, supple, comfortable bike. It's just when you start pushing on, you could just do with a bit more resistance in the rear shock. I have got it on maximum preload now, and you do have to bear in mind that the bike was designed and set up for the average Indian rider, which is probably a little bit lighter than the average Western rider. So I came back from them 3 trips, 9,000 miles, happy as Larry really. I mean, £4 for a bike. Is this the best adventure bike on the market for the money? Yes, I think it very much is. Because what else do you get for £4? You can't. You'd have to go second hand. You'd have to spend another 700 to get a CRF 250L, which to me, when you sit them side by side, you know, the CRF's a decent bike, but it's nothing that Honda couldn't have built 20 years ago and probably built better. You know, it's a lazy incarnation of the trail bike from Honda. It's decent, don't get me wrong, it's reliable, yep, but it's not the last word in trail performance, and I think if you're doing a lot of trails it would be a better probably option than the Himalayan, but as an overall versatile on-road, off-road bike, I think the Himalayan is a better bet. Up against things like the 310 GS, I think it's a no-brainer. The fact that Royal Enfield have actually put some thought into what somebody might need from a travel bike and gone away and designed it, whereas the BMW 310 GS, they've kind of just thought, oh, we'll stick a bit of a beak and some bigger wheels on a regular 310R, call it a GS, when it's not really a GS. I think in a way the Himalayan's more of a GS than the GS is a GS, and it's also more of a KLR than the Versys 300 is a KLR. So for me, as an all-round package, I don't think there's anything matches it. And then you take into account the price, and you think, well, there's nothing can match it on price either. So, yeah, what can I say? It's hard to. I suppose it's easy to get biased when it's your bike and you bought it because you want it to be good. I think where the bike does fall down is that last ounce of performance that you wish. You know, I do like to make a pace on when I'm in mood, and the bike just doesn't have that final zing to really excite you on the road. But that's it. You know, there's nothing that you can do about that other than ride it and see if it's enough for you. And if it's not, then it's not. And if it is, I think you're really going to enjoy the bike. I think questions of durability, I think personally, from my point of view, I've answered them to myself. This bike is a solid bike. I've took it trail riding a lot. It's gone down heavy on both sides, and it's, other than a slight kink in the gear lever, it's suffered no damage. It just feels tough. It feels industrial. It feels as though it'll take a hammering. And I think in terms of the engine and the main core of what could go wrong, I don't think there is any need to worry. Things like I don't know, fork seals have not gone, or the chain feels good. It feels like the chain's going to do 20,000 miles, which for a budget bike again is very good. The only issue I have had is tight steering head bearings, which gave a bit of a notch just around the straight ahead, and just need to be re-torqued by the dealer at the first service and re-grease. I think it's just slightly a bad setup in India where they put the head bearings on, where they tightened up the head. In terms of servicing, I think what puts some people off is a 3,000 mile valve check. Now, I was away on the road at 3,000 miles, so I didn't have my first valve check done till, well, my second one, because I had the first one done at 300 with the first service. But at 4,200 miles, the bike didn't need any adjustment, the valves didn't need any adjustment, and in theory I should have had the valves checked again at 7,200 miles, but again I was on the road, so wasn't able to, and now the bike is up to 9,000 miles and still not had a check, but it feels perfectly fine. So I think that 3,000 mile check was erring very much on the side of caution, just to make sure that the Western markets didn't have any catastrophic engine failures in the first few months, which would have been disastrous for Royal Enfield's introduction to the UK. What do I think about the bike overall that I've not already said? I think this is a coming of age bike for Royal Enfield. We all know for the 500 bullets, which were, they got the charm, but I certainly wouldn't have bought one, and I certainly wouldn't have wanted to go away on one. They were effectively 1950s bikes still made today. This is very different. It looks old, and people come up and say, "Oh, that's a nice old bike you've got there." And I'd say, "Well, actually, it's only 6 months old." It looks old, but the way it rides, from the suspension to the geometry to the setup to the riding position, it's just phenomenally packaged as an all-round package. Suspension, engine, geometry, handling. You can really push on along B roads on this bike. Fizzing along flat out on B roads on this, and it almost surfs the bumps rather than hit them as you would on a lot of bikes. It's supple, but it's controlled. You can make such good pace. When it's all about momentum and keeping your speed up, this thing flies up the hills and on the straights where you want it 80. Forget it. The brakes come into question, and yes, the front brake does lack bite. I think you wish you'd got a bit more bite to it, but it's not there. Back brake is really good, so I find a good squeeze of the front and a stab on the back, and that's, that brings you up. Could they be a bit better? Yes. How would they be a bit better? Not sure. People have tried different brake pads, but that's not made a huge amount of difference. What else? Niggles, not really. The clocks, I quite like the clocks. Everything's decent there. It does get the clocks do get a bit tingly at when I hit 70. You can see the needle just vibrating. The screen's not amazing. The stock screen, you get some buffeting, and I think a little screen lift along the top would do it nicely. Other people have cut the screens right down, and that's actually improved it, which you would think is wrong. I also like that the bike's very serviceable. Even stuff like the big oil inspection window there. Such an easy bike to check your fluid level, which in mine looks a bit low. Oh dear. Air filters just behind the panel here. That's easy to get to. You've got a centre stander, so it's easy to adjust the chain. That's it. That really is it. So if you're thinking essentially about buying a Royal Enfield, well, I would certainly say go out and ride one, and if you like it, buy it. And if you're worried about reliability, personally, don't worry about reliability, because I've been abusive as buggery to this bike. I've had other people ride the bike. I've been trail riding. It's been thrashed on motorways, and it's fine, absolutely fine. That's not to say you might not have niggles with yours, but I get the impression that all we're going to see are niggles. I had one lady who came on my last trip on a Himalayan, and she had a throttle cable snap. Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's not as though it's specific to a Himalayan. It can happen to any bike, and I think that was an issue with just the routing of the cable. It was just pulling itself a little bit tight, and it snapped. So, yeah, I think there's going to be niggles like that. The head bearings on my bike, but to me, they are a long way from being deal breakers. And for a company like Royal Enfield, that had a reputation, well, not a great reputation for building solid bikes, I think for them to have come out with this, put it onto the market, quite modestly put it out there. It's not like they're singing and dancing about it. They've just offered it for sale. The people who've bought it seem very happy so far. I don't see any ones for sale in the classified, which you normally see with a new bike on launch, be it the CCM GP450 or the Africa Twin. They all had bikes in the classified after a few months. People clearly not happy with them, but the Himalayan, now all I see are brand new bikes, which means the owners are happy. I'm happy. It's up to you whether you'd be happy, I guess. Over and out. We're going to go do some trails and enjoy this on the way down. It's very dry. Just got to watch out for these bumps and these rocks and these stones. Now, what kind of trail riding would you call this? I'd just say I'd call it a bit of moderate green laning. This shouldn't challenge an adventure bike, let's be honest, but it's the composure that a bike comes down here that makes the difference. And is it manageable, importantly, for a novice? And I think what's great about the Himalayan is that with an 800mm C-type, even a short arse can get the feet down and paddle if they need to. And the saving grace of many off-road excursions is getting your feet down and paddling. It's not heavy to move around and push around. I've had people on trips recently come on GS 1200s and they can't even turn them around in car parks. They can't even turn them around on campsites. They need two people to move the bike around on the campsite. They're clearly overbiked, or bought a bike that's too big. The Himalayan, 191 kilos. I think they've hidden most of it in the steel rims, because there's a bike to chuck around, pick up and push. Very nice indeed. This lane, by the way, is called the golf course lane. I don't know why, as there are no golfers around here. And it's just a lovely long trail, good visibility, good traction, a good change of surface. And I think these kind of trails are what you need to improve your trail riding ability. Just to get into the flow and the rhythm of being stood up, looking ahead, gentle on the power, gentle on your brakes and your throttle, and you're hitting that a bit harder than I thought. The only other negative, non-switchable ABS. If you're really pushing on and you hit the brakes, the problem with these ABS systems is they can't compute, and as soon as they feel heavy braking on loose surface like gravel, they just go into a spasm, and then they neither give you any braking nor disengage, so you've just got this weird pulsing while you're increasingly rushing towards whatever you were trying to brake for. It can be hazardous, and it generally only is when you're riding like a bell end. So if you're not riding like a bell end, the ABS or the non-switchable ABS shouldn't really be a problem. But there's been a few times I have been riding like that said bell end and had a panic when I've not been able to stop. A little switch on the handlebars like you get on the GS310 would be nice. That way you could just disengage it. I'm sure if you know what you're doing you could easily put in a switch yourself, but sadly I do not know what I am doing when it comes to electronics. So at the minute I'm just up on the pegs. I ain't got the bars gripped tight, I've just got the calves slightly tight around the side panels, moving the bike around with my legs, letting it move as it wants to, not rushing it, covering the back brake. You don't want to be hitting the front brake too hard on something like this. I'm in third gear, the engine's just sort of ticking over a couple of thousand revs. I'm looking ahead, I'm trying to pick a line that's a little line of least resistance, I guess, like a gully. So there, okay, my ABS is engaging there, so it was just pulsing on the lever. I've got no stopping power whatsoever when it does that, and to me that is not a great thing. So many bikes are like it these days. There's pretty much only BMW that trusts you to, and KTM that trusts you to disengage the system completely. All the others, including Honda, are sort of nanny you, and they only allow you to disengage the rear ABS on the rear wheel, and equally every time you turn the ignition on and off, it re-engages it and you have to disengage it again. So it's not as though Royal Enfield are anyway different to most brands, but it's a pain in the a-hole. It's funny as well because the Indian market that got non-ABS bikes and still don't have an ABS model in India, they're desperately hankering after an ABS version of this bike, and I honestly think they'd be better off without it, because it's not like you've got much power to get you into trouble on the road, and on the sort of dirt roads that India is sort of riddled with, then I think non-ABS is better. But there will always be that time on the road on a wet surface, or when you just aren't quite engaged concentration wise, that you need to hit that front brake, and ABS somehow manages to haul you up, whereas otherwise you'd be locking up the front, probably sliding right into the thing you were trying to stop for. So yeah, it's a funny one. I just wish it'd give you the option. Beautiful view though, look up there. It's easy to get carried away and just look at the trail when you're trail riding, but look at that. Mid Wales, this just outside the town called Ryder, R-H-A-Y-A-D-E-R. This is a very easy trail to find. Message me if you want me to tell you exactly where. I suppose like all trails, people are very possessive of their trails that they know, because if everyone finds out about them, they're going to get swarmed with traffic, they're going to get complaints for overuse, and then they're going to get closed down. So that's why if you see somebody who knows some trails and you ask them where they are and they're a bit coy, it's because they don't want you hooning up and down it and getting it closed for them. But yeah, just yeah, I mean, you fly down here on a proper enduro bike, and to be honest, the CRF Rally Honda it'd make a lot lighter work of this, just because of the suspension travel and the fact it's suited perfectly as a trail bike and intended as a trail bike. I think where the Himalayan finds its better feet, its own feet, is when you look at it as a travel bike. What does travelling entail? It entails some road work, it entails some off-road work, some gentle trail work, it involves carrying a lot of luggage, it involves doing some long days, it involves going without fuel stops because there aren't many pumps. When you consider it like that as what a travel bike needs to be, that's why I come back to the fact that the Himalayan is probably the only bike in this small category of small capacity adventure bikes, and in fact it's probably the only bike of the last, I'm going to say 5 years, where I've actually rode it and thought the designers, rather than marketeers giving it fancy digital dashers and electronic suspension and stuff like that, and whacking a few hundred or 1,000 on the price, they've actually got, what does a guy who's going to ride this bike need? And they're pretty much given, or girl I should say, they're pretty much given the bike all that. So I think I've got on long enough. I just hope my camera's worked, because I do like the Senna 10C setup. Normally I'm a bit of a technophobe and I struggle with GoPros and things like that. Certainly with the external microphone I can never get it to work. So I thought I'm going to get a 10C. See, the only problem there, I will point out with trail riding on the Himalayan, is ground clearance. Just going through that rut, you can just feel the bottom of your feet brushing against the top of it. And that's because to give it an 800mm seat height, they've had to compromise the ground clearance of the bike. And while it's not terrible, it does get caught out of the average UK rutted byway. The centre stand grinds out or gouges out, and so do the foot pegs. But yeah, nothing in life is perfect. ABS kicked in again there. So again, £4,000. Back to where we started. Would I buy another one? Yep. Would I recommend you buy one? I recommend you give it a test ride. Because for me, India, surprise, surprise, have possibly built the best adventure bike of the last 5 years. And some people won't agree with that, and that's absolutely fine. tell me what's better, pound for pound. Alrighty, good old Himalayan. Oh. See, the only problem is, as I pointed out, the bike stays a little bit upright, which makes it precarious. Oops, I do it. I've even got my Crocs, bags in place. Lovely jubbly. That's a nice little handle. Knobbly tyres probably would have helped, but even a TKC 80 still finds its limit quite early on. The Mitre CO9s were very good on the dirt actually, and on the road surprisingly for quite an aggressive knobbly. 3,000 miles I got out of a rear on a 24.5 horsepower bike. So for longevity, they are not choice number one. These Conti Escapes have now done getting on for 5,500 miles and still have probably another 3 left in them. So, and they were cheap. £135 fitted. There we go. Cheers everyone.